All right, good morning, guys. Jordan here.
Danielle?
Welcome to our Game of Thrones rewatch breakdown of Season 1, Episode 3. Make sure, obviously, this is a spoiler warning, not just through Episode 3, but through the entire series, as we'll be talking about scenes and events that happen all the way through Season 6, as well as all of the novels. So if you want to avoid spoilers, avoid this until you're caught up. So, Season 1, Episode 3, where do we start?
Starts in King's Landing. We have Ned and Jamie talking to each other.
In the throne room.
In the throne room, you come in and he's not sitting on the throne, but he's sitting like on the steps to the throne, like
all casual like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so Ned starts kind of giving him shit for that. He calls him the Kingslayer, and he talks about how unethical it was for him to stab his king in the back, and basically sharing some of his concern that the Lannisters aren't trustworthy.
And this is kind of a throwback too for Robert's original rebellion, because the first person in the throne room after the Mad King was gone was Jaime, and when Ned walks in, he's actually sitting on the throne. So this is kind of a throwback to that initial distrust of, who are you? Kingslayer really is who Jaime is at this point in time.
Right. And I think it's kind of a connection to what we find out in season 6 with Ned not being quite as honorable in his battle at the Tower of Joy as, was...
It's the stories, that are on about him.
So it's like, does he kind of have an issue with it too? Because it reminds him of the fact that he didn't... And not that he was the one who stabbed someone in the back, but he kind of would have died if... what's his face?
Holland Reed.
No, but who did he stab?
Arthur Dayne.
If Arthur Dayne wasn't stabbed in the back.
And it also kind of hints at Jaime's later redemptive arc, because this is the stabbing of the Mad King. He was supposed to serve and protect this king, but we later find out that the reason he did this was because the Mad King wanted to blow up the entire city rather than see it fall into enemy hands. So Jaime actually saved thousands of people by killing the Mad King.
Mm-hmm. And we can talk about that a little bit more with theories too, because
we'll
there's some theories related.
Yes.
Okay, so they kind of talk about, I forget who says this, but I wrote down that they said, the truth will be what you make it.
That's Cersei to Joffrey.
Oh,
that's
yes,
later.
okay.
Yeah, that's
so
later
Cersei
on.
and Joffrey are talking. He's kind of upset about the fact that, Sansa saw him in this compromised position and this whole situation from the previous episode with Lady being killed, and so he's kind of upset at the Starks and sees them as their enemies, and they talk together about them being their enemies.
Yeah,
basically.
she specifically says a good king knows when to save his strength, and a good king knows when to destroy his enemies. And Joffrey, so they are our enemies. He perks right up at that because he hates Sansa already. He openly admits that he hates her to his mother, and she says it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and he's like, do I still have to marry her? And she
says yes.
She complains so much about Robert whoring and kind of being disrespectful, but then she
even tells Joffrey,
that's what you can do.
If you want to do that, you can.
And so I find that really interesting because she's really creating the monster. Like, he might have a predisposition to be insane because of the incest or whatever that they talk about being, like in the Targaryen line when there's all this incest and then it creates the Mad King kind of thing. But she's also creating that by these kinds of conversations. So it's pretty telling of where he gets his crazy from.
Yes.
And then we have Ned and Arya talking.
Oh, yes. Where
she's on the stairs and she's like balancing.
And this is where she shows him her sword, Needle. And
I don't think that's yet.
She's not balancing yet because she hasn't met her dancing instructor yet. So you're skipping way ahead.
Okay, I don't know what they talked about.
No, this is when they get in the fight at dinner, and then he goes into her. She says she wants to stab Sansa, basically.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then he says, right. If you want to learn how to use, if you're going to own a sword, you have to know how to use it. And later on, we get one of the greatest characters ever on Game of Thrones in Syrio Forel, but that's not till the end of the episode.
My bad.
But they have this conversation where Arya talks about how she hates everyone there. She hates the Lannisters. She hates her sister, but she later walks that back. She says, "I don't really hate her." But it's kind of telling that Arya is this young girl, and she's already figured it out. She already knows the Lannisters are their enemies, and
so is Ned.
Ned knows, but he doesn't quite get the extent of it. I don't think
he realizes the danger of it.
Yeah. Because he's still playing by rules, and there are no real rules in this game that he's playing with Cersei and Jaime and Joffrey.
Well, and I think it's interesting too because it shows that he knows Sansa was lying. Like, he says, she was brought in front of the king and the queen, and she has to kind of be on the king's side, or not the king, but Joffrey's side, because she's going to be marrying him, and that's something that you have to do. Which I also found interesting because he didn't do that with Catelyn. Like, he didn't tell her about Jon. Even though, like, he kind of makes this big deal over you have to be with your partner even if they're lying, or, you need to lie for them, or... and so it's kind of interesting because I think it shows more into his morality, that it's not just doing what's right, which is, I think, the really... when you have the really clear, stark people like Arya and Jon, it's like doing what's right regardless of the consequence. And he's there saying, like, no, you have to do like what's right for these people that you love. Like, he is much more into focusing on the people that he loves and doing what's right by them versus doing what's maybe morally right.
And it also goes back to a line that Ned tells Catelyn where he says, "I'm going to hope that Robert is the man I once knew he was." And by indicating that he knew Sansa wasn't telling the truth, and Robert still kind of was more focused on his son and his wife, he knows that Robert is not the man that he once knew. He realized that too, sitting in the small council, that this is a guy who has no interest in being king, and no interest, or he is interested in being king but not ruling. He just wants the title. He wants to do whatever he wants, which is not the man he once knew, he thinks.
Right.
But it actually turns out that's Robert now.
He's becoming more and more fearful.
Yes.
Then we go to Winterfell.
Yep.
We see Bran walking, and there's a crow, the three-eyed crow.
We get
so
the
we're getting
three-eyed raven.
We get the first dream of his, and then he wakes up to Old Nan, and
I love Old Nan's stories. Old Nan is hilarious.
Yeah, and so he reminds her that his favorite stories are the scary ones.
And so she tells him a scary story.
Right, so she starts talking about White Walkers and ice spiders, which I wrote down ice spiders because that's bigger in the book, and we don't see them in the...
They've still never been shown, they've never shown up in the books, but they get talked about a lot more. And there's rumors that there's, underneath the wall, who knows what's there. There's, rumors of ice dragons and ice spiders and all sorts of stuff kind of imprisoned in the wall. So we'll see that. But I also thought this was interesting because Bran tells Robb in this scene, "I would rather be dead than crippled." And it echoes back to the line that Tyrion was talking about. Dead is such a finality from an earlier episode. Dead is such a finality, whereas life is full of possibility. And so much later on, which we'll get into,
he's such an important
Bran
person.
is such an important and powerful character, and he probably never would have been if this hadn't happened, if he hadn't been pushed out the window, because he never would have.
We don't know for sure, but assume.
Yeah, we would assume that he never would have gone north of the wall if he had the use of his legs. He hadn't been called there.
Right, and it kind of, in the show, it kind of portrays the fact that he kind of gets these abilities after having fallen.
Yeah, they kind of awaken.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't know that for sure. He could have been having these dreams previously, but the way it's portrayed, it seems like they started happening after he came back from his coma. And so then we go back to King's Landing, and this is when we have Catelyn and Peter Baelish. So they meet. He has guards or
and of course he knows she shows up as soon as she is in King's Landing. He knows she's there.
He has someone bring her and Sir Roderick to the brothel. which upsets her greatly.
Yes, and Varys is there as well, showing that at this point,
They're
Varys
working
and
together.
Littlefinger are kind of working together still, and they have kind of an uneasy alliance as the two most in the know characters in King's Landing. And yes, I love when Littlefinger then brings Ned to the brothel, and he tells
He
him
almost kills him.
he tells him your wife is in there, and Ned almost chokes Littlefinger to death because he thinks it's some sort of dig at him, and then she sticks her head out the window and hi, I'm here, and they have this.
That's a little later in the episode, but
they talk about their suspicions about the assassin, and this is Tyrion's blade, and
that's what the big thing that comes up is in the brothel. Varys is like, I don't know whose blade this is, and Peter's like, oh, I do. It's mine.
It's mine, but I lost it.
I lost it to Tyrion, and we have no confirmation that that's accurate because we know that Peter is really manipulating things.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not true, or if it is true, we know Tyrion didn't send the assassin after Bran.
Right.
So, it's Littlefinger at his finest, basically, just pulling all the strings and manipulating everyone into believing what he wants them to believe.
And I wonder, why he chose Tyrion.
Because Tyrion's so easy to hate. I mean, people already distrust Tyrion and dislike Tyrion. Not audience members, obviously, we all love Tyrion, but the people of King's Landing, he's seen as this grotesque monster, even when he's trying to help, when he's the hand of the king later on, he's hated because he's different.
It's possible that he won it and then sold it or whatever, or his siblings took it so that they could blame it on him if worse came to worse. Because, obviously Cersei wants to get rid of him.
Yes. And then Ned sends Kat back home. And I thought this was really fascinating. As they leave, did you hear what song was playing?
I don't think...
Reigns of Castamere. The Lannister, anthem where, they're destroying people. So as they part, that's the song that's playing in the background. Kind of showing that the Lannisters are holding all the cards and are destroying the Starks kind of from within.
Right, and that's the last time they see one another.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go to the wall and we see Jon training. He's everyone kind of hates him because he's kicking their ass or whatever.
Because he's castle trained. He was training to be a knight essentially with the other Stark children. So he's obviously way better than petty criminals and stuff that he's going against.
And then a raven comes with news for Jon, and so there's three guys that we end up liking for the most part, minus the one. Yeah. But we have Pip
Bran and Pip. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the one guy we never liked.
Yeah, because he's the Craster's Keep, one of the Craster's Keep guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they basically were gonna kill Jon.
Yeah.
And then Tyrion walks in and has news for him. So they have that conversation.
I love when Tyrion's like, you all have very distinct faces.
Yes.
Very distinct. And they all just, they walk out.
And I think Tyrion has such a good relationship with Jon. He knows how to talk to him.
It's fascinating because, the two Starks he most connects with are Jon and Bran. And that's, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. That's the idea here that Tyrion has this affinity with these characters who feel slighted because he himself was slighted. Right. So he basically teaches them, you need to help these guys rather than just kicking their asses. And it goes to show that later on that
really helps.
That helps a ton. And he kind of rallies these guys and galvanizes this support.
Right. If it wasn't for Tyrion, Jon might have been killed at the wall.
Yeah.
Because not just in this scene, but even eventually, because he would have kept being pouty.
Pouty Jon.
Pouty Jon. Everyone's against me. Woe is me.
Yeah.
Instead of creating a camaraderie with his fellow brothers.
Later on, these are Gren is the one who kills the giant below the wall, and isn't Pip the one who takes over?
Takes over what?
Lord Commander.
No, that's Ed.
Oh, that's Ed. Might be.
No, they both die.
Yeah.
They're both down there.
Yeah.
I think with the.
Yeah.
So then we go back to King's Landing, So we have Peter Baelish. The Raven comes regarding Bran waking up.
Yeah.
Or...
We already talked about this part.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the part with Catelyn and Ned in the brothel.
No. Or sure.
Yeah, because he says, "It's my wife in Winterfell." My wife's in Winterfell. He said, "Is she?"
Yeah. Okay. So I wrote down the fact that Peter said, "Is she?" because I thought he does that line so often when he knows what's true. So like later on when he's with Sansa in the crypts of Winterfell and they're talking about Lyanna and Sansa's like, yeah, he chose her, but he raped her or whatever.
Did he?
And he goes, did he?
Yeah.
And so I like that little connection of that's how Peter kind of gives his tell, like without revealing everything he knows. He's sharing. He gives you a hint. And so obviously that wasn't part of this episode, but what all does he know about the Tower of Joy, about Daenerys? I mean, about anything. He knows
seems
everything.
like he knows it all.
So it's...
And if him and Varys at this point are confidants, they obviously keep information from one another, but all they do is spy on each other. So I imagine pretty much everything Varys knows, Littlefinger knows.
Right.
And Varys obviously knows all this stuff because he's a Targaryen supporter. And we have no idea. And we find out later on, Littlefinger wants to sit on the Iron Throne, but we don't really know where his support he is drawing from, like where that's coming from, because he's playing so many people. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of those two if they ever encounter each other again, I think.
Okay. And then the other thing in King's Landing, so we've kind of skipped around a little bit, but
this episode was kind of disjointed. There's a lot of
back and forth,
moving pieces, yeah.
But when Catelyn and Ned are partying, something I thought was funny is Ned tells her Peter still loves you, and she says, "Does he?" And so she mirrors the way that Peter talks.
Except she also says stuff like, "He's like a little brother to me," and he's a creepy little brother.
Right.
That's the case.
But I just found it interesting that she mirrors.
Yeah,
the
she
way
does
he
the
talks.
same. Yeah, that same kind of mocking smile almost.
Yeah. And then we have Varys and Salmi, King Robert and Jaime sharing war stories.
First man he ever killed, yeah.
Right. And they mention the Tarleys, which I think is interesting because we get Sam
and
shortly.
we don't meet Randall Tarley, his father, till much later, but yes, we do meet Sam very soon.
And then we have Lancel Lannister in there.
Drink! And the wine's empty. And he's like, "What do you mean the wine's empty?" Yes, I love the way Robert just abuses Lancel because he knows it pisses the Lannisters off.
Yeah.
And later, Lancel turns into such a important character, really, when he joins the Faith Militant. Oh, and just with him and Cersei, that kind of sets off that chain of events of the Faith Militant, and then Lancel joining them, and then later, boom, Lancel is almost the one to stop that. So it's amazing that this kind of throwaway, wimpy character at this point in the game becomes so important. Yes.
Right. And they talk about the Mad King with Jaime.
Burn them all.
Yeah. And so we can come back to that with theories too. But that's kind of the first time we hear about how he was crazy. Like we talk about him a little bit with Ned and the fact that he's Jaime's the Kingslayer, but you get a little bit more insight into what was happening. Then we jump over to Essos, and we have Jorah and Dany talking. They're leading the
Khalasar?
Yep. And they talk about her being the queen, and she says, "I'm not a queen, I'm a Khaleesi."
Yeah.
And she's starting to feel more powerful.
Yes.
And she decides to stop, and we don't really know why. She just wants to look around. I don't know what.
And this is the first real kind of balance shift in power between her and her brother, because he comes out all red-faced and screaming and
abusive.
And he almost gets killed for it. One of Khal Drogo's blood riders puts the whip around his neck and says, "Do you want me to kill him?"
And at first she's fearful, and she becomes a little girl again, and she's like, "Please don't."
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, and they look at her like, "What? Like, why are you talking like that?"
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm the one in charge here."
Yeah.
And she takes that power again,
and then I love when he's like, "You don't get to ride.
Right.
You walk." And yeah, he's like force visitors to walk, which is like the ultimate sign of disrespect. You don't belong on a horse like the rest of us. And yeah, that's the first time that, Viserys is really underneath Dany now because she's riding a horse and he's not.
Right, and I think it's the first time he's realizing that he's not the one in power.
Yes. And
that
starts to...
For him, he's made a big mistake here.
Yes. He has made a terrible mistake, yes. And this is also one other thing in Essos. I know we skipped back to the wall, but this is the last thing in Essos, so we might as well talk about it, is when Jorah is discussing the weapons of the Dothraki with one of the Blood Riders, because they're having the discussion about what's better between a broadsword and the curved araks that the Dothraki carry. And it's interesting because where we are now, presently in the story, is the Dothraki are coming to Westeros to fight for Daenerys, and there are tons of them, but will they be able to fight a medieval siege battle when they're untrained? They're powerful fighters. They don't wear armor. So will they be able to fight against a much smaller force of kind of disciplined, trained, armored troops? Jorah here, it sounds like he says he doesn't think they will be, because the Arak won't be able to get through armor. So the Dothraki are going to have to change. Luckily, she's got the Unsullied and the dragons,
she's got a lot
too.
of things,
yeah.
Eventually. Okay, so we go back to the wall. It's very snowy. This is where we're really seeing winter happening.
Yes.
We have Benjen warming his hands on the fire because he has
cold
cold hands. Which right now is a theory in the book, but George R.R. Martin has explicitly stated that Benjen is not cold hands, but the show went that way.
But on the show, we find out he is.
So Benjen talks about disturbing reports, and Jon is like, "I'm ready. I want to go with you." And Benjen's like, "You're not."
You just got here,
right?
Yeah. Jon's probably been there less than a week at this point. He's no time at all. So yeah, definitely not ready to venture forth north of the wall.
Yeah, and he's like, "You're not a ranger yet." Technically, he's not even
he hasn't even taken his vows.
Yeah. And so they have this conversation that's really different for Jon, which is, you earn, anything you have here, you earn. Just because Jon's like, "I'm better than all of them. I can fight better, I can ride better." And it's true. He's really talented. Not only did he have that training, but he's talented in that.
Yes.
That's mentioned throughout the series. Him and Robb are really good fighters.
Yeah.
And so's Ned.
Well, because Roger Castle trained them, and he's one of the best masters at arms in the Seven Kingdoms.
Right. And they're just really naturally athletic, like Ned is and was.
And Arya.
Yeah. They just have that natural talent, too, whereas you see Bran does not.
Yes. Well, Bran climbs, though.
Right. He has natural talent in other ways.
Yeah.
I just mean with fighting, he's not a fighter.
Yes.
And Rickon, obviously, because he cannot run from
He
arrows.
can't zigzag. At the wall, too, we get Tyrion talking to Benjen before Benjen leaves.
Well, first, I want to finish the conversation with him and Jon, because he tells him that he gets what he earns, but then he also says, "I'll talk to you when I return."
Which is the second time this has happened.
Jon just gets so many people telling him, "Oh, we'll talk about things when I come back, but don't worry, I'll just die first."
He still could talk to Benjen, though.
I know, but...
But, yeah, I love this idea that everyone's like, "We'll talk later," and then...
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yes.
Then we go to Benjen and Tyrion.
And this is, again, Tyrion expressing an opinion that's very similar to Jon, and very that same idea of, I like the rejects, kind of, because he and Benjen have this conversation that they both realize that the wildlings aren't any different than them. They're just people, as Tyrion says, our grandparents were lucky to be born on the right side of the wall.
Which
and
is
Benjen,
very speaking to class and like different things in our reality and with wars. It's just, which side are you on?
Yeah, and Benjen agrees with him. Benjen knows that the wildlings aren't inherently evil.
But at the same time, Benjen puts him in his place. Tyrion doesn't believe in any of the lore.
Yeah.
He thinks the wildlings are the only thing they're fighting, and Benjen...
Grumpkins and Snarks, yeah, he names these kind of goofy little fairy tale creatures,
right.
and Benjen is like, no, you need to listen to me.
Right. Yeah. Benjen reveals that he's seen these things. So even though, other rangers act like it was this huge thing to see the White Walkers, you can tell that Benjen, as first ranger, knows a lot more than everyone else.
Yes.
And why he isn't revealing it is interesting. Maybe it's because he knows people won't really believe him or they'll freak out.
Or I think he thinks people will freak out and desert like that one guy did when he saw him. So...
so maybe he's playing off like he's going to look into the fact that what's his face is becoming the king of the wildlings.
Mance
Rayder, yeah. But in reality, you can see the grimness on his face. Like he knows
he's
these
ready
disturbing reports are not a normal wildling.
Benjen is, he doesn't want to, but he is pretty aware that he is in big trouble, I think. Being first ranger, he knows.
Right, and he's
how
choosing to go by himself, I believe.
I think he takes a couple people with
him,
but yes.
And then they speak to the fact that he's going below, and they mention that there are tunnels below the wall, which become more. I don't know if they, because we don't see them. We see tunnels, but they're not below. They are.
Well, they go below the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily underground, but I mean, the wall's so tall. I think that's,
But I think it's interesting that there's tunnels below, because what we learn about later, and we can talk about in theories, is that the magic of the wall only goes so far. So there's an idea that you could tunnel under.
Yeah, they talk about how the White Walkers could never get over the wall. They always say over, they never say under. So there is that idea.
Okay, we go back to Essos. We find out that Dany is pregnant.
Yes.
And we have Jorah and the Blood Rider talking, which you mentioned. And, her handmaiden comes out and it's like she wants something other than horse to eat, and reveals that she's pregnant. And you see Jorah's
dog.
Jorah change. Jorah
the Explorer.
Jorah's demeanor change, and he realizes he has to go, fulfill his mission. And you can kind of see that he was starting to have an affinity for her and the Dothraki. And but he remembers, like, this is actually his mission there and his main goal. So he's still in a very selfish mindset.
Yes.
And so he leaves to go tell about that. But you can see that he's a little bit, like, you can kind of see him, like, wish that she wasn't pregnant yet.
Yeah. But he also, isn't this where he rides out on his own?
Right, so he leaves and...
Yeah, to go report on this, because he's still reporting at this point.
Yeah, and her Blood Rider is like, oh, okay.
You're just going to go disappear? But obviously the Dothraki have no real sense of spies. That's not really a Dothraki idea.
Right,
so,
and Dany is still pretty innocent at this point, and he's like her one person that's giving her insight on life outside of this Dothraki people, as well as her brother who's abusive. So she doesn't think anything either. Then we go back to the wall, and we have Jon actually helping and like people getting interested and developing friendships and getting better fighters. We find out that Tyrion has lived through 8 or 9 winters. So it kind of gives us insight of, okay, winters have been really short in the past. And this
they
summer,
keep calling this the long summer, yes.
Right. And so far there's been 9 years of summer.
Yes. So
this is like a bizarrely long summer.
Which usually indicates that a bizarrely long winter will follow.
Right. And so they're foreshadowing that fear of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
They mention White Walkers. They mention mermaids.
They do mention mer people, yes.
Which Jordan and I yelled and pointed at each other because, you didn't watch our episode 2 where we talk about the theory of Varys being a merman, which is hilarious.
It's hilarious and strangely more convincing than I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm. And then we had a conversation of Aemon, and this is Aemon, Tyrion, and the Lord Commander talking about, they need more men. This winter is coming. It's going to be awful. There's going to be, this is real. Like, they're trying to give precedent to Tyrion to help send men because they don't have enough men to man all of the towers. Like, they're kind of revealing that how weak the wall has become.
It's not just Tyrion, though, because they tell Tyrion, ask your sister.
Right.
Which I think is kind of a slight against Tyrion. I think they would have been much better off saying, please help us. You've seen what it's like here. But instead they say, please ask your sister to do this. And obviously Cersei doesn't.
Well, they really want to get the king on board.
Yes.
And they think that Tyrion will be able to get a sister who will be able to get Robert. When in reality, Tyrion
couldn't
be
convince
better
his sister.
on his own.
Yeah, Tyrion could not convince Cersei of anything. If anything, he should go tell her, don't send anyone to the wall. And she would be like, I'm going to. Just screw you. Because, yeah.
But he's smart enough that if he was motivated, he could figure out ways to help the wall.
But I don't think he's still not that concerned.
Right.
I don't think he really truly believes Benjen, and
he's privileged enough to assume that even if there are terrible things, they'll never affect him.
Yeah, it's not going to affect him. Exactly.
And then we go back to Essos, and the only thing I wrote was so they are talking about her being pregnant, but the visuals keep being on the eggs.
The eggs that have the candles lit all around them. Yeah,
and
the fire burning all around them.
And I think that is really interesting because, yes, she's pregnant, but her children are going to be these dragons. Yes. And I think that's foreshadowing.
Yes.
To the fact that these are her babies. She's been pregnant as soon as she got those.
Yes.
And of course, we go back to the wall briefly, and we have Tyrion pissing off the wall. Which is great.
And then this is also where Tyrion talks to Jon, right?
Probably.
And
They're both on the wall.
He says, "Say hi to my brother." Basically, tell Bran I say hello, and this leads into the next episode when Tyrion is so coldly received at Winterfell until he addresses Bran, and that's what really.
Right. So he talks about he's going to be traveling back, and,
yes.
And are you going to stop in Winterfell? And,
yes.
Yeah.
And then finally, one of my favorite characters ever.
Yeah, back at King's Landing.
Syrio Forel. He's just, he's basically Oberyn Martell, who is my favorite character.
But happy.
Yeah, happy Oberyn. But yeah, just, he's so Inigo Montoya, just this like classic swordsman, and teaching Arya how to fight. And this is the first time that Arya has really been trained how to fight. Right. She obviously has a natural affinity for it, as they showed in the first episode.
More so than her siblings who have her male siblings who have been trained.
Yes, so
and who are older than her. It's really fascinating how much talent she has.
Yes, and she's being trained in this unique style of the water dancer, as opposed to because she's too little. She wouldn't be able to hold a big old broadsword and wear armor and stuff like that.
And another thing I find interesting is as soon as she walks in, he calls her boy, which later on, after she leaves him, she becomes a boy.
Yes.
She
Ari.
Right. So it's kind of foreshadowing to the fact that, and we can talk about him a little bit more in theories, but how much does he know about her and her story?
Yeah.
And since he's from Bravos with the Lord of Light and being able to see into the flames kind of thing, we can talk about that in a little bit. Then we have Ned watching, like he kind of watches some of their training, and
he has this little PTSD moment.
Well, he's really happy at first. He's smiling, like
Arya is,
how talented she is and how feisty she is, and probably how much she reminds him of Lyanna, his sister that he loved dearly. But then he kind of gets grim, and we don't know if it's a PTSD. We don't know if it's fearful of what Arya is going to become.
But you start hearing like clashing.
But you hear not wood on wood. You start hearing metal on metal.
You hear the sword and armor type clash.
So it's definitely foreshadowing
the trouble. The wars to come. Yes.
Right. So when they focus on him, it switches to that. So we don't know, is that him just remembering fighting, or is that him fearful of the future? Is it in the past or is it in the future? But we hear those metal swords, which is interesting. So that's
the episode. Serial Pharrell is the end of the episode. Yep.
okay. So theories, we have quite a few. So we want to talk about Serial Pharrell. The Mad King.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie with the Mad King.
Yes.
Let's see. What else?
I don't know. You're the theory master.
Nope, I got that one. I think those are the only two.
Okay. So
Or
yes.
three. Is that two or three?
That's two. Serial and then the Mad King.
Okay. So we have. I feel like I said multiple times. We can talk about that in theories, but I don't know what the fuck is talking about. Okay, so we have one theory is with Jamie becoming. So he is the Kingslayer, and there's a theory that he will become the Queenslayer.
Yes. The prophecy of Maggie the Frog says that the Valonqar, the little brother, technically a little sibling, but she's taken it to mean little brother, and she's taken it to mean Tyrion. That's why she becomes so fearful of Tyrion. But in actuality, Jamie is also her younger sibling. Even though they're twins, she was born first.
Right.
And she has now, in season 6, committed the crime that Jamie killed the Mad King for trying to do. He was trying to stop him. And we see a look on Jamie's face at Queen Cersei's coronation at the end of season 6. He realizes he's failed in his attempt to stop this. And this might be finally the turning point. In the books up to this point, Jamie has really soured on Cersei.
Right, they're a lot more distant.
Whereas in the show, he has professed his love to her up until now. And then this might be the transformation of Jamie transitioning to that role of Queenslayer.
And so there's a lot of other ideas around this. So Tyrion could be the Valonqar, but it doesn't have to be her sibling either.
She's interpreted to mean her sibling,
right?
But it could be any younger sibling. Yes.
So another big theory is that Arya will kill her since
she is on the list.
Since Cersei's on Arya's list, and she is a little sibling. Those are the three main ones that I've heard, but technically Dany could be that.
It could be Daenerys. It could be Jon.
Part of the theory is not just that she'll be killed by her sibling, but she'll be strangled.
Yes.
So
Jamie with his gold hand.
Right. So I think that's where I'm like, I don't know if it's Jamie.
Yeah.
Because if it was him stabbing her in the back, which the show might differ a little bit on that theory, because I don't know if they specify the strangling part in the show like they do in the books. But obviously I could see, we already have seen Tyrion strangle Shay to death. And I don't put any kind of death past Arya.
Yes.
I couldn't imagine Dany strangling her. There's no emotion there. Strangling is kind of an emotional way to kill somebody.
And also there is the poison that was used to kill Prince Joffrey, King Joffrey.
You can think of that as strangling?
Well, it's called the Strangler. It's the Tears of Lys, which is also in colloquial terms known as the Strangler. So it could be poison, which we've also learned that poison is the weapon of women and eunuchs. So it could be, Varys isn't a younger sibling, but...
it's also the weapon of the Dornish?
Yeah, they like Oberyn Martell and his poison spears, so...
and we have that great conversation later on with someone giving Oberyn shit about the fact that poison is a woman's weapon, and he's like, poison is an intense...
Yeah.
Like, he gives...
Although he favors a painful poison. And the Strangler's scary, but it kills you right away. Because Joffrey dies, within a minute or two of drinking it. Whereas the mountain is huge, so it takes a lot longer for the poison to affect him. But he's in anguish for forever with that poison.
But it's kind of interesting because the Dornish are kind of enlightened, so to speak, with... or progressive, I should say, with their... roles of sex.
Yeah, their gender roles are very fluid. Oberyn is openly bisexual. They're very open about affairs and having paramours, and it's Dornish are very interesting in the way they handle gender and things like that.
Right. So I thought it was interesting that if we're talking about the possibility of poison, it's like, who else is becoming more enlightened to the fact, like, let's do what makes the most sense versus this is the right thing to do.
Well, especially when you're up against like a super villain like Cersei Lannister, who will blow up half her city to stop people. You've got to get rid of her however you can. So yeah, I'll be very interested to see what happens there.
Yeah. Okay, so there is another theory I wanted to talk about regarding the Mad King.
Okay.
Which is, so when Jaime says, he's kept saying, "I'll burn them all," and he said that for hours. That leads to another theory that's out there about Bran, and the fact that maybe Bran kind of pulled another Hodor on the Mad King and was,
actually helped drive him insane.
Right, just like what happened with Hodor, where he could only repeat, "Hold the door." The Mad King could only repeat, before his death, he was only repeating the same sentence, which was, "Burn them all."
He said for hours, Jaime said.
For hours, that's all he said. So,
this idea that Bran was trying to tell the king, you need to burn all the White Walkers.
Or just that he was there, kind of like, maybe he was there and he was trying to tell somebody else, like a different king, or like maybe he's trying to tell Jon.
And somehow it did that weird time loop again, and then this thought kind of broke the Mad King, and it's
a theory that's out there. I'm not sure.
It's a possibility, but the Mad King's madness and obsession with burning was already well documented.
Right, that's why I'm not sure about it.
But even still, the fact that it's very reminiscent of Hodor. It could be.
I think it's a valid theory. I'm not sure if it's going to be true. And then the last one is Syrio Forel. So there's so much theory around him.
And I think it's mostly just because people do not want Syrio to be dead.
Well, they give lots of hints to the fact that he isn't.
Yes.
We have Arya and the Hound talking in later seasons about the fact that that Syrio was killed by the Kingsguard, and the Hound is like the best swordsman in the world. Basically, was killed by
Meryn Trant, who's a clown.
Right.
Yeah.
And he talks about, he's like, anybody could beat Meryn Trant. Basically, is what he says, and he's like, and she's like, well, he didn't have a sword, and he's like, oh, the best swordsman didn't have a sword, and it's like, maybe he did have a sword on him.
And we don't actually ever see him die, which usually in Game of Thrones they show us when someone dies.
And we do hear, and we'll talk about this when we get to the episode too, but I believe you hear a sword fall, but it's not a wooden sword, it's a metal sword.
It's true.
So we'll analyze that further when we get to that episode, but
there's lots of possibilities that Syrio is not gone.
Right.
That maybe he's a faceless man. Maybe he's Jaqen H'ghar.
Maybe, that's a big one, that he's Jaqen H'ghar. Because why? So
how does he just randomly show up
and have this huge interest in Arya?
So there. But let's get more there once we get to Syrio, because this is just the introduction to Syrio.
But also something about it is like, why was Syrio the one who's teaching her? Like, in all of Westeros, they picked a Braavosi.
Why didn't you get a Kingsguard or something like that? Yeah, get Barristan Selmy to train her or something like that.
Right. Yeah. It's really interesting that that's who Ned chose. And we know that Ned knows about it. We don't know how he came about picking him.
Yeah.
But, he's there observing it. And maybe it's because he can pass it off as a dance lesson when he's telling people.
Yes.
But
you don't think Barristan Selmy would teach Arya dance lessons?
I think that, he could have chosen a lot of people. Maybe it's just because he doesn't trust anyone on the Kingsguard. But he has his own army there, too.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's interesting. I don't know what Ned knows about her and about Braavosi, that's the person who was chosen. So those are our theories. We'd love to hear your thoughts on them in the comments.
And the merman theory.
Always. Anytime we never realized that they mentioned merman. So now if they ever do it again, we're going to be like, oh, merman.
All right. We're on our list now. We're doing Evilest characters.
Evilest
characters. And this one, there was not much debate when we got towards the top.
But a lot of variety.
But a lot of
names came up.
So let's both do our number 10s, then we'll do our full group list.
Okay.
So my number 10, I did Meryn Trant.
I did Shay.
Yeah, Shay starts okay, it seems like. In the book,
I really liked her at
first. In
the
book, she's a lot worse.
Right.
And yeah, Marin Trant, he doesn't play a big enough role, but he's a pretty nasty person. It's pretty awesome when Arya gets rid of him. Number 9, I had the High Sparrow, which was kind of a debatable one, but High Sparrow's pretty nasty in my book.
My number 9 is also surprising to most people, Egret.
Mm-hmm. For some reason our group loves Egret.
Yeah, a lot of people do, and I find it really interesting because if she was a man and John was a woman, people would hate her.
Because she's
extremely
like a textbook abusive relationship. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, she's constantly threatening his life if he leaves. It's like really bad, and people don't get it, and I don't understand. So if you get it, tell me in the comments because I need some camaraderie around the fact that she's evil.
Number 9, I had Daenerys' brother, Viserys, who was pretty low on my list compared to a lot of people, but
he got pretty up there in our group.
He gets really high up there, but my issue with him is he doesn't play a big enough part in the series to be considered evilest, even though he is pretty nasty. But
my number 8 was Tywin. His evilness is kind of behind the scenes, so it's kind of easy to not think about him.
He doesn't get his hands
evil.
dirty, but he is a nasty customer. Yeah.
He's pretty,
number 7, I had Littlefinger.
I had Theon.
Mm-hmm.
Which also Theon, people kind of were resistant towards when I mentioned him.
He starts out awful.
Very evil.
Yes, he starts out awful. The only reason he changes is because he's mutilated and broken completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had to go really far. He had to go the furthest down of anyone to make any kind of comeback.
Yes. Number 6, I had Tywin there.
I had Peter.
Yep, so we just kind of did a little flip-flop with those. Number 5, I had Roose Bolton.
I have Viserys.
Yep.
Or Viserys, or
however people say his name, all
his name.
different. Number 4, this is when we started to kind of solidify. Number 4, I had the Mountain, Gregor Clegane. His evil is a lot more obvious because he loves to get his hands dirty. Some people see him as more of a tool, but he enjoys it, especially when he's alive.
He was on my honorable mentions. I just don't see enough of his background, like his drive to know. Number 4, I have Joffrey.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward with him.
Yeah, he's up there pretty high. Number 3, I had Cersei Lannister. She did blow up half the city just to achieve her goals.
Right. I had Ramsay as my number 3, which a lot of people had as their number 1.
Yes. Number 2, I had Joffrey.
Number 2, I had Cersei.
Yep. And number 1, I had Ramsay.
My number 1, I had the Night King.
Which, that one had some debate. Like, I definitely get where you're coming from. Because, for all intents and purposes, he's like an evil zombie megalomaniac warlord. But we don't actually know if he's evil yet.
Well, the fact that he kills so many people and then just uses their body for his own purposes is pretty... if we're talking about abusive people...
Yes. And but I think the main issue people had with that, which I totally get it, because he probably is the personification of pure evil.
Right.
But it kind of goes back to that conversation Cersei had with Joffrey. He might just be on the wrong side of things at this point in time and trying to fix it. So,
Tyrion with Jon had that conversation?
No, when Cersei's talking to Joffrey, she says, history's what you make it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I guess I combine those two. Okay. But yeah, he might just be on the wrong side of things, but he probably is pure evil.
Right, and we know a little bit more about how he became.
Yes.
So.
Okay, so
at least in the show.
Our group list, remember, it was 1 point for 10th place, 10 point for first place. Yeah. So they're weighted. Our number 10 was the Night King. Our number 9 was Tywin Lannister. Our number 8 was Craster, which
was on neither of our lists.
Yeah, neither of our lists, but I definitely can see it. He was a pretty nasty customer. Number 7 was Littlefinger. Number 6 was Walder Frey, who also didn't make our list. He was honorable mention on my list.
Same for me.
He seems like he's just a pawn, just a puppet. He's trying to get
He's
powerful.
more gross to me than evil.
He's opportunistic and he's ticked off that he's not more powerful.
He's probably, he is evil, don't get me wrong, but he's just a little too stupid for me.
And if good people had been the most powerful people in the kingdom, he would probably be good. He's more just opportunistic, right. I think. Yeah. Number 5 was Cersei. Number 4 was the Mountain. Number 3 was Viserys. And then Joffrey was 2. And Ramsay Bolton took number 1, especially when he went full on supervillain mode at the end of season 6.
Yeah, we did have lots of conversation too about parallels between him and Joffrey and Viserys. So our top three, we talked
very
about
similar characters.
how similar they were, how they loved to just torture. Torture is their main thing. We have a lot of people on this list who were evil, who killed a lot of people, but they killed them quickly and kind of without a lot of thought behind it, almost.
Those three.
But those three were like
and the
all
Mountain,
about torture.
who was our number 4 on the list. Those 4 characters all rule through absolute fear. There's no like hints at compassion, no hints at.
Yeah, but the Mountain isn't about torture. Like he just slammed that guy's head in. Like he doesn't.
Well, that's when he's a zombie. He was running the torture at Harrenhal. He didn't actually do it personally, but he was authorizing the torture at Harrenhal with like the tickler and stuff like that. So, but the Mountain, you could not ever ask the Mountain like, "Please forgive me."
Right.
Whereas Cersei, if you said "Please forgive me" and it was in her best interest, she would. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Mountain would just kill you and not worry.
Yeah, the Mountain I feel like just likes to kill, whereas I feel like a lot of the other people
they like
to make people suffer and
especially, and I think that's why Ramsay won, because he especially thrills in that fear and suffering. You know, those hunts he would send women out and then set his dogs on them. Yeah, and I think that's why why he ultimately won.
And Joffrey was very similar in enjoying torture Sansa and
the prostitutes that Tyrion got him and all that.
So that's our season 1, episode 3 rewatch breakdown.
So please, who do you think's the evilest character? Let us know. What did you think about this episode? What do you want to see in future from these characters and ideas that we have? So
give us a thumbs up if you like this episode, and subscribe so that you don't miss any future ones, because we will be going through all 6 seasons, hopefully before season 7 airs, and then we'll be going through season 7 with you.
Yes. So have a great one. Val, you want to try it again? Valor?
Valor Morghulis?
That's pretty good. Valor Morghulis.
Is it Valor?